This is a Clouds weather alert.
Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at a very serious weather situation that seems to be really getting itself going as we look ahead later in toward that Wednesday here. I know we're on really late with this update, but this is a very serious situation. The Storm Prediction Center just upgrading here in the last half hour or so, an area of the middle of the country here, the heartland per se, to a high risk of tornadoes later on here as we look ahead. So you really got to be paying attention if you're in that area or if you have friends and family in that area. This could be very dangerous. That purple area there is where the greatest risk for tornadoes expected to be, and it could be very volatile atmospheric setup. So you just got to have multiple ways to get alerts here. We'll be on as is necessary for the national coverage. I mean, a high risk is something that's rare, doesn't happen very often, something that could be talked about for years to come. Sadly, just hope folks are heeding those warnings. Let me go ahead and zoom in to the purple area, the zone that's greatest, in danger here per se. We never want to see an area in danger to this degree, but that's what we're seeing here as we're looking ahead later on to that Wednesday. So that purple area there, I'll zoom in even tighter, then we'll kind of broaden it out. You see Cape Girardeau, Paducah, a little bit of southern Illinois in here. The risk of strong to violent tornadoes is there. Some of those could be long tracked, and that is not what you want to hear. When I talk about strong tornadoes, what I'm talking about here is I pull up the EF scale. I know we had an EF0 tornado toward Leon County into Big Bend in our area here in Florida back on Monday. EF1 toward southeast Alabama around Dothan. But instead, in this setup, we're talking about the potential that some of the tornadoes will be more like EF2, EF3, maybe even EF4 in strength here, folks. So this is very serious. If you're in a mobile home, excuse me, if you're in a mobile home, it's very, very important here to go ahead and have that plan in place for when that tornado watch, not waiting all the way to the warning, but just when the watch gets issued, you go ahead and make sure you're seeking safer shelter, because this could develop very, rapidly here, a volatile setup as we get later in the afternoon and into the evening. This could be a very serious situation here for these folks. As we go ahead and look on in here even tighter, I mean, you see some of these areas, you see Mayfield, they got hit so hard back there in 2021. I can't believe it's been that long ago already, but a devastating situation for those folks there. And we could have, in this vicinity, not necessarily the same town, but in the vicinity, tornadoes that are somewhat similar to that. Tragic one there. We really got to be careful. Got to hope for the best here, but prepare for the worst. You see areas here in southern Illinois like Vienna there, Anna. You see, as we zoom on in here, all these different towns being impacted potentially here by the severe weather. Not everybody's going to get a tornado, though. We got to keep that in mind. A lot of folks are going to be spared. Tornadoes still only going to impact like 1% maybe of the whole area in terms of the different winds that could be evolving. But then you still have hail and really strong winds as well. But that area and those areas that get hit are going to have potentially grave consequences. Here you see Metropolis in here and the like. So we'll go ahead and zoom back out a little bit now and zoom in a little bit to the south. You see Sikeston in here. You see Murray. So, of course, the university there, Murray State University, they're at risk, of course. Southeast Missouri State at risk around Cape Girardeau again. This is really serious. You see out toward Poplar Bluff, they have been having their very unfair share here, per se, of tornadic activity recently there, that March 14th night. So fateful there. And we just gotta be paying attention in this vicinity. Kenneth there in the Boot Hill, Missouri. And then we get in northeast Arkansas. They, been getting hit as well back on March 14th. Some areas with EF4 type of damage. You see Jonesboro there in Arkansas. Over toward Blytheville, you see Memphis, Tennessee in the Mid-South, a high risk, a 5 out of 5 risk for tornadoes, some of these strong to violent tornadoes. So this is very serious stuff that we're talking about. You don't see this very often. Even that March 14th, it was a moderate 4 to 5 risk for tornadoes for a lot of these areas as we're looking at things. And then it was 5 out of 5 further down on that Saturday, the 15th. But on that 14th, it was a 4 out of 5, and we had EF4 tornadoes. So this setup not the same spots generally are going to get hit, but the point being is we could have tornadoes to that level here. It's not a guarantee. There are some things that could kind of make this environment a little less conducive at times, and there's a chance. I was honestly a bit surprised to see him go to high risk here. I thought they would have kept it at a moderate storm prediction center based on there is a chance that, we have so much rain, we have a big, big flood problem that's going to be on our hands here towards some of these areas as we look ahead. I'll get to that in a moment. But there are, some model guidance details that are telling us that there's a chance we could have too many storms that are interacting here at points. And then it kind of, makes the environment a little less favorable for just the strong to violent tornadoes. Probably, we're not going to have the environment get that maybe torn apart per se in terms of the active weather not being as extreme, but there's that small chance, that small sliver there of that potential. And then we get down, the red, even, any of these areas, but the red and the gold, we cannot look past these areas by any stretch of the imagination for strong to, even maybe a violent tornado in a random fashion, but strong tornadoes can still be deadly, especially to those in mobile homes. You have 2, we have 3 tornadoes definitely possible. We can't, Roy, I don't want to get too specific on the strength for certain areas because you can't do that in meteorology. But my point is, we're talking about the potential for strong tornadoes is there even toward Little Rock there and Cabot and some of these other areas here later on that Wednesday. You got to stay weather aware, got to stay weather alert, Stuttgart there as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things there, if that's how you pronounce that. Excuse me, as we're tracking things here, but Pine Bluff, Star City, Fordyce, Camden, Arkadelphia. You get the idea, and then we get into northern parts of Louisiana, Ruston there, that's Louisiana Tech. Shreveport's in here, you have Texarkana. There's still risk for some strong tornadoes way down there. And I'll zoom it out. I need to go back north because we cannot look past these areas either toward north of Cape Girardeau, Perryville. You're under a substantial risk for tornado activity here. A little less, but still could be a big problem around Farmington. It's not out of the question. Even all the way up here toward Festus and Arnold. You see St. Louis here. That's the 10% risk. And that means they're in the hatched area generally, and that's just risk, where the strong tornadoes are possible. I just took the risk off, Roy. Anywhere in this huge, huge area, that is unbelievable, quite honestly, could have a, life-altering type of tornado. 99% of the people, you're not going to have them, because that's just how it works with tornadoes, even in a higher risk. But the 1%, give or take, if you get a tornado, it could be one of those that we talk about for a long time. Like a Mayfield tornado. Let's hope not, but something like that, could end up being something along the lines of even a more Joplin tornado in one of these communities within this very large hatched area. Again, I hope not. I don't say that to scare you. I say that to prepare you because, again, 99% of you are not going to get a tornado, but if you get that tornado, it could be something that's very substantial, very significant here. And you gotta take heed. This hatched area goes all the way from around Longview, Texas there, Shreveport, near Monroe, that area, Little Rock. You see Greenville, Mississippi in here, Oxford, that's Ole Miss there, Tupelo is in here. You see Memphis, of course, the Mid-South, so dangerous, this threat coming up. Jonesboro, Arkansas, that's Arkansas State University. As we're looking at things, you see around Nashville, so that's talking about Vanderbilt there, of course, and the like, and toward that area. I think Lipscomb and Belmont are in there as well. As we're looking, I know Tennessee Tech right on the edge there in Cookeville. So got to stay weather aware. You're still, could easily get under a tornado watch as we look ahead. Of course, Paducah there. We talk about you guys, and you're under that high risk here for tornadoes. So please stay weather aware again. Cape Girardeau, Poplar Bluff area, Sykeston, Paducah, Mayfield, Murray, Union City, the Northwest Tennessee, Lake O'Brien and Weakley counties here in that area. You just got to be really mindful of what could happen as we're looking at things. This could be very volatile setup, of course, University of Memphis there in Memphis. as we're looking at things there as well. Now that red area, we can't look past it. We can't look past areas further up in southern Illinois either. I mean, you see Mount Vernon and Marion, and then getting into even close to, and not just close, but in toward Terre Haute, we could have a strong tornado. Most of these spots I'm saying are not going to have that, but one or two could have one that really changes things for a long time. So we really got to pay attention here. You see up toward Lafayette, Indiana, even a 10% tornado risk. Kokomo, Indianapolis, you see, Fort Wayne. This is huge in terms of the scope of this. You see areas in Ohio there, all the way to about the Ohio State University area in Columbus, Cincinnati, under this risk here. You see Lexington, to the University of Kentucky, of course. So we have areas there around Louisville. It's not popping up for me, but here you go. Louisville there. Of course, that's an ACC school there. As we're looking at things, of course, we watch FSU in athletics here in our area, and graduated from there, of course, and, and fellow ACC school under a very significant risk for danger here as we get it later on that Wednesday and maybe that early Thursday as we track things for the tornado risk. So, this risk is just huge. Even Chicago under a risk that could get them a tornado watch. South Bend, Indiana there, they had some really nasty winds back on Sunday, University of Notre Dame, and, risk for tornadoes coming up there. So, very dangerous stuff right now here at about 1:30 Central Time on this Wednesday morning. We do have a tornado watch currently on play. No active tornado warnings, but you see even some severe thunderstorm warnings that are popping up. One of these impacting areas there, McPherson, Harvey, Butler, and Marion counties in Kansas. 65-mile-an-hour winds reported there around 1:35 or so in the morning. And as you see up toward the north, we're watching. I know that yellow area goes all night with the tornado threat lingering there. The pink would probably be more severe thunderstorm activity about the winds and hail, but tornadoes, like we saw a threat toward areas there around Salina, Kansas earlier, they can happen, even in and close to a severe thunderstorm watch area here. So see Kansas City there right on the edge right now. They're supposed to be, based on Storm Prediction Center information, they're expecting to issue a tornado watch downstream here in that red circled area in the next little bit. So a nasty situation in that regard as we're looking at things here. So really dangerous stuff as we're tracking. We're thinking we could have bad, severe weather, maybe some stronger tornadoes around Oklahoma City back on that Tuesday that did not materialize. We could have some storms later in the night that are severe, even tornadic in an isolated instance, but we ended up having the atmospheric cap not really being able to get broken there. But if it would have broke, we would have had a situation where we would have had some discrete storms that weren't just trying to produce hail and then fading away. We would have had maybe a long pack tornado or two back on that late Tuesday. That did not happen, thankfully, but and toward that part of Oklahoma, central Oklahoma. But again, a nasty situation here, obviously, that we're tracking on that national level. Let me go ahead and try to put some of that model guidance on here now. As we're looking at things, again, in the last hour, the Storm Prediction Center has doubled the tornado risk all the way to 30% for later on that Wednesday here for parts of Missouri and southern Illinois, western Kentucky, western Tennessee, northeastern Arkansas. This is a big deal, very big deal, as we're tracking things here in the meteorology world. Doesn't happen very often. It didn't even happen on that March 14th event. It did happen for March 15th, though. We had deadly weather impacting areas like in Mississippi, for instance. But as we go ahead and see the model guidance here, so what I'm going to focus on is when this activity really picks up in especially the red and purple, but even in that gold area here. So this is the forecast model. As I'm going to take off the current lightning. I already took off the radar, but I keep the current warnings on here. But as I kind of zoom in just a little bit more, I know it's such a big area. I hate to zoom in too tight again here. We already went hyper local to some degree, but I'll zoom in a little bit more toward the high risk at least, and then we'll kind of go from there and kind of go up and down this the best we can. So, okay, so this is supposed to be around 1 o'clock Central Time. Could be some isolated tornadoes there as we're looking in parts of south central Missouri, maybe around Springfield there, give or take. We'll watch it. The threat isn't huge at that point in the day, but it's something to monitor. as we're tracking maybe some severe weather potential from Chicago. Could have some hail, something like that. It would be a possibility. As we look here, you see around 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern, we're watching some of these storms. They're still, lingering, some of these west of St. Louis and the like. And then you start to see them really start to mature by about 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. We could start to get some tornado reports here maybe as we look toward like St. Louis, maybe around areas there in the vicinity of Festus could have, tornado warning, something like that. And Puay, Centerville, and you see some of there in the northeast Arkansas. But a lot of this area is still untapped here. I mean, we have all the parameters coming together in a very wrong way. So, getting that energy piling up here in some of these communities potentially. And then you see around 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central, still some of that stuff there on St. Louis and the like. It's still not maybe an overwhelming outbreak at that point, but then you start to see some stuff to the south. Our model guidance is going to paint the picture a little differently. That's kind of on the edge of the higher risk areas, but that's there in toward Mississippi. Some of the storms are starting to kind of get further up there, and then you really start to see, this is by 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. You see everything just taking over that purple area. So let me just back it up an hour. That's when things could really, escalate rapidly here between like 6 Eastern and 7 Eastern, which would be 5 Central, 6 Central, out that way. You start to see this stuff potentially piling up here in this purple area. This is all, a give or take type forecast, but you see around Memphis, this is painting a supercell. Now, if we get too many storms in this environment, we still could have tornadoes, still could have some strong tornadoes, but it may mitigate the violent tornado threat a little bit, but we South see. You see there around Memphis, though. You see around Jonesboro in Arkansas. Don't look at the exact spots, but you see Cape Girardeau is painting a picture of something that could be very volatile as we're looking here, as we're tracking things. I-55 potentially in the threat here as we're tracking things, and then you see the threat just persisting here, and this is about 8 o'clock Central Time. See around Paducah, all these storms clustered there. This, again, could be a big problem as we're tracking things with these storms, because they're not showing up like just in a line. They're showing up with that supercellular characteristic, which can indicate strong to violent tornadoes in isolated nature. Again, I keep emphasizing that 99% of folks, even though we have this terrible risk input, are not going to have a tornado. You could have the straight line winds, a hail threat, sure, and that could be a pretty big deal, but the tornado threat will only impact a small sliver of folks. We don't know who those folks could be, but whoever gets impacted could have life-changing type of weather where houses are just destroyed in some instances. That's anticipated right now, sadly, as we're looking at this. And then you see here by around 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, you need to watch, because there's some guidance that says even all the way up into, Indiana here, we could have some big problems. That's a big risk for them, a moderate tornado risk. And, Bloomington, that's Indiana, that school there. As we're looking at things, this, is a problem here. Obviously, these are areas that are not used to this here. As we're looking all the way up to about Bowling Green, you see bordering on Nashville, of course, there. You can't forget about them in central Tennessee. We just got to really, really pay attention, obviously, here in the meteorology community. So this is a big issue as we go ahead and look here. We keep progressing this. You see the tornadic activity here, hour by hour. This gets us into the nighttime. We still could have a threat persistent. Eventually, we should have the threat kind of try to subside for a point. This is like 1 a.m. there on that Thursday, as we're tracking things. And then, there'll still be a threat though into the overnight. You got to have multiple ways to get alerts. Don't get me wrong. You got to pay attention as we're getting there closer. This is towards sunrise, and as it starts to go into another issue, now we're going to have a severe threat linger day after day. It'll be lower, but it'll still probably be enough to require tornado watches here and there for areas around Memphis, which is unusual. Kind of could already have, really violent tornadic weather, and then in some of these areas could have warnings for days on and off here. Whether the tornadoes may not be as significant, and they may not be touching down, but this is not a good setup at all. As we're looking at things, we're getting in toward Thursday now. The threat's lower. Right now it's a 2 out of 5 tornado risk. That's still, noteworthy. Don't get me wrong, but and that could go to about a 3 out of 5, give or take. I just don't like how that develops. I think it could happen, but down there from Little Rock South, that could be tornadic weather at times. As we're looking ahead, some large hail as well. A lot of times, if a big outbreak and it moves out, instead we're just gonna have some severe weather potential lingering for days into Friday, into Saturday, and then that's gonna pile up the flooding threat here. This sounds pretty awful, as we're looking at things. The flash flooding threat could be catastrophic in some areas here. You got to remember the mantra from the National Weather Service in general is to turn around, don't drown. We're going to have numerous flash flood warnings. There'll likely be some flash flood emergencies here. Hopefully, it's a flooding situation where folks are taking heed. You think of what happened in Nashville years ago with, terrible flash flooding. There could be some issues that remind us, of that in this. Same with areas there and around Hazard, Kentucky. They've had a couple big flood events here, especially a few years ago. It's so noteworthy and deadly. We could have a issue on our hands. I'll get to the flash flooding guidance here in a second. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking the latest information here, obviously, in this late night update, this very late update. As we're looking, I know some folks watching from, around Dallas there and on YouTube. You don't want to forget about them. They're under arrest. They could get them a tornado watch. Some wind, hail, threat to possibility. As we're looking there. So we just got to pay attention, obviously. I'll see those before I switch. Our hail threat there, that's a substantial one. Could have large, very large damage and hail in that green area from Chicago through Dallas. Wind that could be, hurricane force gust in that green area. That includes Detroit there as they're tracking things. So, and then this is the overall wind risk, maybe one you're more accustomed to seeing. It's so big I have to zoom out really, really far. But, significant tornadoes expected that corridor. I'm talking about, very, very dangerous stuff. And then as we look at hail, we could be talking about very significant hail, 2 inches larger in that zone generally. The wind could have hurricane force gusts in some areas in that zone. Again, not everybody either is going to get that huge hail, but more folks would have a chance of getting some hail here than you would a tornado in general. That doesn't mean it's going to happen like that, though. So, again, we just got to pay attention here. Obviously, I don't mean to scare you again, but this is a very big deal. You see some stuff developing now, which the environment, let me check that now because we'll just look at this. The parameters aren't there now. If we could somehow, the more stuff we could develop earlier on, that could be a problem for the flood threat, but we want to mitigate the tornado threat in the short term. If we could try to get sometimes, you can get this set up where we get a lot of stuff to develop earlier on, and then that can help mitigate. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but to mitigate. But let me go ahead and kind of look. I want to see if our model's kind of picking up on this or not. There's so much to look at. It's possible that it was picking up on it anyway. It's picking up on some of it, but it's not showing a whole bunch out of it. So that's pretty similar to the output on the model to what's actually happening. Maybe slightly heavier downpours in there, but as we go ahead and look again right now, even tornado watch for Wichita, Emporia, that goes until around sunrise or so on that Wednesday morning here. You see severe thunderstorm watch in the pink, Topeka, Kansas City areas on the edge of that, but there's going to be a new tornado watch coming out soon according to Storm Prediction Center. 80% chance of that needed. So, as we're looking at things here, we're just going to keep track of these using flash flood warnings in Kansas, sign of things to come. Kansas State University getting some nasty weather right now as we're tracking things. They're in Manhattan. So, just continuing to track all of that. I'll just zoom around a little bit more here. As you're tracking Lawrence and Kansas, that university, they'll be getting into some of the storm action later on. So, again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest. Already some wind damage reported in northwest Missouri. So that's a big problem there, a big cause for concern. Let's go ahead and see the tornado safety tips now. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring the situation here. Historic outbreak is possible. I hate throwing that word around, but this could definitely be dangerous here as we're looking ahead. A high risk of tornadoes doesn't happen very often. So it's very important that folks make sure they stay tuned for the latest updates out there in toward that area, charge their devices, and have multiple ways to receive alerts. Conditions are favorable for tornadic activity. In a tornado watch, and they're going to be favorable, as we've shown you there. But tornado detected using radar spotters. When you have a tornado warning in play, you want to try to avoid taking shelter in a mobile home. That's so important. Those are where those structures, stronger tornado especially, they're just going to be wiped away for sure. Even like you have 2 tornadoes, it's not going to take even as strong to be just completely gone. And as you see here, though, you want to get inside a sturdy wood and put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. You want to protect yourself from flying debris by putting on a bicycle helmet, football helmet, baseball helmet, something along those lines. So very important to keep in mind. And then we're going to do a little bit of local weather in this update too here over North Florida, South Georgia. So stay tuned, or if you're watching on demand, you can kind of fast forward here a little bit, because I know we've already been talking a really long time because it's such a big deal for areas out toward the Midwest, the center of the country, Mid-South, give or take. That vicinity is going to have big problems here meteorologically. Like, this is a situation that could be one of the biggest weather stories of the year. It probably will be, as we're looking ahead and toward the timeline as we're tracking things. I mean, this tornado risk is triple what we saw on Sunday toward areas of the center of the country. So just continuing to track all this here for sure in the Weather Center. So let me go back to the tornado parameters. I want to show you guys something real quick here. I know there's plenty more of this to get through, and we're very unlikely to get this lucky going forward here based on the model guidance. It was a conditional risk, but if we would have got the tornadic cells there to emerge, supercellular structures to evolve and stay intact toward Oklahoma back on that Tuesday, it could have been very bad, because we're talking about tornado parameters over a 10 right now. So if we would have had, storms if the atmospheric cap wasn't in play, now we're not going to get storms there later on, but it'll probably be more in the line later on in the night. Could have some embedded rotations though, so that's something to watch. We're honestly not seeing as much development here, as some of the guidance is saying, but you see as we look ahead later in the night, we should have some development. So yesterday, whether we're even in Oklahoma, even though the threat is lower than it could have been, it could still be very dangerous here later in the night if things emerge. But those are just off the chart tornado, parameters. Now to the north, you're probably wondering, well, why isn't this stuff produced and what's in the line? But we're expecting storms to be by themselves, and they're able to take advantage of the environment a lot more easily and be able to spin. So that's the issue here as you look at the instability values. But we were looking at a cap in play, and we have some of that in play in some of these areas depending on where you are, and there's certain factors, we can't say all of them here on the air, that are so important for this though, to see if we do in fact get the tornado threat to be extreme or not in certain areas. But temperature is very warm here. I mean, these are really toasty temperatures here, and that's a sign of the issues that we're going to have. And we have just really hot type temperatures coming in play here in this pattern. That's classic. When you have a big outbreak up to the center of the country, this time of year, you can have very warm temperatures down here. Not always, of course, but toward the southeast, we could have this, record-setting type of heat here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking the situation. But it'll cool down next week after it's going to be early next week until this stuff tries to make its way toward us. I mean, see some scattered stuff now. We'll have scattered storm acts, and maybe because it's so warm, but nothing substantial about Sunday, Monday here. And this system and this pattern is finally gonna bring the threat into play here locally as we look ahead. But it's gonna take a while. I mean, let's see here the I know this is a very long update because of the big danger that folks are in. But let me go ahead and put on some of the model guidance. So this is just gonna kind of help you understand this broad brushing it a little bit here. But let me go ahead and show you. So this is going to be, I'm going to go through this kind of quick because there's so much to get through. But this is your Wednesday. I already said the higher res on this, so it doesn't look as bad as it actually is. I mean, it starts to look pretty bad knowing the global model eventually. But then as you get, this is into early Thursday. We see the threat lingering Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. You can look for the yellows and reds where we could have the biggest threat. Just could underdo it a little because it's a broader model. But as you look into toward Friday, more storms here, and some of this is just heavy rain for the north, but and then as you get into Saturday here, more of a threat. It just lingers and lingers here, and really heavy, maybe Saturday where the flooding threat is already bad enough. All the rain they've had, damage from storms, and you have more storms piling in. It could kind of really break things open here in terms of maybe river flooding Saturday night. If we get a pattern like this, that's when folks will be trying to watch the Final Four there in college basketball. So that's not an ideal situation there as we're looking either. I know it's a tricky situation already for folks trying to, broadcast during that. Trying their very best to keep the public safe there, but also try to balance that interest in basketball. I mean, the public's interest, in terms of needing to know about the severe weather takes the most, of that priority here as we're looking at things. So this is already nice Saturday. Look at that, just lingering in there. That's not good in terms of all that rain just piling up. I mean, this is Sunday, and it finally starts to swing our direction here as you get later in toward that Sunday, and you're looking at things here as you're tracking things, trying to move on in. This is getting toward that Monday next week, and you finally see it coming on in here to the picture and trying to move out toward early Tuesday. And behind that, some of these temperatures, though, which I don't normally show like this. Let me switch it over on the other source. So this is temperatures, so let's get to like later on here. So it'll be the 9th. We're talking about in that green here in North Florida in the 50s. Atlanta in the 40s. Maybe upper 30s there. Toward like St. Louis next week there as we're looking. So weather should calm down eventually. I see the Storm Prediction Center. Things are just going to be crazy. Coming up, they're talking about putting out a watch now. They already had one earlier and then dropped it for Arizona, Oklahoma City, and more Norman. And it's so blowing here, but they're thinking they're going to have to issue a tornado watch. And they think, I don't like this. This is 2 in the morning we're talking, folks. And 3 Eastern, 2 Central. They're talking about, I think there could be some strong tornadoes now that could pop up there in these areas again, because those parameters were off the charts, and if stuff stays divided enough, we could have strong tornadoes in the morning there in Oklahoma. That's just not happened very often at all as we're looking at things. I mean, those parameters though are off the chart as we're tracking things there, so that could be an issue if we started to get discrete development here. Our model was kind of hinting at that a little bit, honestly, not what some of the other guidance was showing, but what a mess here as we're looking here in the meteorology picture. Very, very big deal. Make sure your friends and family know about this very significant danger that's going to be facing folks in the hours and days to come as we're looking at things. Just got to be really careful. Got to be really mindful of what's going on here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking here. So again, just continuing on this very long extended update because of the danger. We're going to keep looking at things here. It's very late, obviously, but such a huge, huge threat here. And then let's go ahead and see the rainfall forecast next 7 days, really the next 5. I wanted to include our area in this. I mean, the next 5 for that area where we have the bullseye. 10 plus inches of rain anticipated on a widespread scale toward areas there in the center of the country. I mean, our area is going to have quite a bit, but that's not until Monday or so. You see like 2 inches, an inch, give or take, depending on where that coming into play. But really the next 5 days here, that yellow area, that's 10 plus inches. I mean, a lot of those spots will get around 12 inches, probably around Paducah. But there's a chance, and I hate even going out like this, but some areas could, because the guidance is not going to always pick up on the higher resolution details. We have just the higher pockets of rain. With all this rain in play like this for just days and days, some areas could end up getting closer to 15 or 20 inches of rain there in an isolated spot or two around Paducah or the Boot Hill, northwest Tennessee. I mean, we're just watching, that's northeast Arkansas, Missouri, especially in the Boot Hill. I mean, just so much danger. Southern Illinois in there. Of course, when we're not on, go to clutter.com/radar for an interactive look at things. We're not going to be on for all of this time, obviously. And I know when it's a bigger national story, we'll be on. We'll be, giving you updates as we can, as necessary here, since it's not just a local story. We're not going to be on 24/7. But I know those local TV stations in the heartland, they'll be on top of it. I know I interned, it's been almost 10 years ago now, somehow, toward KFVS there in Cape Girardeau is where I interned. And Grant Dade, his team will be on top of it, as they always are there in Cape Girardeau in the heartland. it's been a pretty busy stretch here at March 14th. They had the act on Sunday, but now this event is possible. There were fatalities in that area back on March 14th that night in that TV market. But it's possible this event could be worse, maybe significantly worse for areas in the heartland, especially Cape Girardeau, Paducah, that vicinity there. So as we're looking here, you see there's so much rain as we're tracking things. I mean, that's a widespread 7 inches of rain, and that it might be hard to make out on there. That kind of I guess you could say gold color. That's widespread 7-inch totals on average. Some areas could get more and we'll get more. Some areas get a little less. And then that highlighter type of yellow, that's where you're going to have widespread 10-inch totals. But some areas are going to get more, as I alluded to. So river problems are likely. Problems with creeks and streams are very likely as well. This is a big problem. You got to remember the mantra, turn around, don't drown. I know a lot of these are basements. In that area, Cape Girardeau, Paducah, southern Illinois. So you're talking about areas there, indoor southern Illinois. I mean, Massac County comes to mind, and that's that vicinity. You have a basement, it could flood in this type of setup, depending on what we're talking about, Metropolis and areas like that. I mean, this is a big problem. I mean, Memphis is so highly populated, and you're going to have big problems as well, between the rain, flood threat, the tornado threat. This could be very, very bad news. You got to remember whenever there's a tornado warning, getting into your room away from windows. And then when there's a flooding threat, you got to make sure to turn around, don't drown, but try not to be out on the roads unless you absolutely have to. If you're evacuating, maybe because your structure's really taking on a lot of water or something like that. And you got to be careful when you get on the roads as well. So this could be a dire situation here, folks. In some instances, it probably will be. Just, thoughts and prayers of everybody there. Local area real quick. As we're looking, we're always on top of things for any tornado warning storms in the 62 counties. We had that storm. It ended up being an EF1 tornado producer out toward Dothan that prompted a tornado warning for a little sliver of Early County. Now, we didn't have any tornado warnings with the tornado warning storm holding together in our area. We did have a confirmed tornado, though, ultimately. We saw a little bit of something look like a debris signature radar on Monday. We were talking about it ended up being a high-end EF0 tornado there toward parts of Leon County. Pretty rural area, though, and no structures were impacted, thankfully. But, you just always got to stay weather aware. So if thunderstorm warnings were on play in toward that area. Again, setting the scale, you have 0 tornado, and I know we're on really late because I know we want to make sure we give you the information. Also, that upgrade to a higher risk relay. Maybe you want to make sure I turn this into more of a severe weather type update. So I've got a few extra things together on that for that Midwest. It could be, a tragic scenario coming up for some of these folks as we're looking here, as we're tracking. But we're talking, light damage toward Leon County, a little bit more toward that school there around Dothan with some injuries looking to be pretty minor, but moderate damage there. But we could just talk about considerable, severe, devastating damage towards some of these areas in the heartland of the country as we're looking ahead later Wednesday. Could even be, we haven't had an EF5 tornado officially here in over a decade, but it's possible we could have something like that later Wednesday. We sure hope not, though. Yeah, we'll just gotta stay tuned, stay safe, obviously. But that would be, something that would take time probably to upgrade, even if it ever happened, in this type of setup, which hopefully it does not. That would be really bad. Folks, I know it's a very serious situation anticipated, though, as we're looking ahead. Let's go ahead and come back to the graphics, because I do want to talk about a dense fog threat here locally. Since we are doing kind of a hybrid here with our local stuff, I was already getting that together before we decided to go into this kind of overdrive with the severe weather mode, since they went to a high risk like that to the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. But you see the fog safety tips. Locally, here's some fog. We have some fog advisories in play over like Tallahassee and the like as we're tracking things here. So just make sure you slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination here. This extends to like McClenny and South Georgia, Southeast Georgia as well. Just making sure you're really being careful. This can be deadly. It's a, hidden hazard. Kind of like when you have the heat. I mean, even now we got to watch the heat to some degree. We don't have like heat advisories in play or anything, but that's a hidden hazard too. You got to make sure you drink plenty of water, and then you got to check the back seat, obviously, if you have a child, you got to make sure they are not staying in that car when you're leaving it, because that can be deadly very quickly as it heats on up there. It's, starting to get to that time of year where that time that could happen, where if you leave somebody in the back seat, they're not going to have much time, in this type of setup, because the temperature is just going to heat up so fast there. But you just want to, in terms of the fog, leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you. So important to have those low beam headlights on as we're tracking things. And then as you see here, that plane forecast locally, North Florida, South Georgia, area where we talk about, all our different dangers so much. But right now, the danger here locally, fog, heat, not a problem. Maybe, a little bit of lightning, but other than that, no severe threat until late Sunday and the Monday next week here. The low is red for the national storyline, not the local storyline. But watch it, you see the big cool down really behind that. I mean, we're getting to temperatures in those lower 90s Thursday, Friday, Saturday especially, but even Wednesday and Sunday, possibility in some spots. It's probably going to happen in some spots as well. So very warm temperatures. You see these 60s here on the board, but then we start to get closer to average. I mean, looks like a big cool down, but that's really closer to what we should have this time of year, not this looks like May or June type heat here in play. As we're looking at things, even with some pop-up storms at times, like what we had on Tuesday. We had that 30% in there just in case, because, you just gotta be mindful in this type of pattern to be aware of it as you're tracking things here. You can get that pop-up convection with this heat and humidity coming into play. I know rip current threat there as we're looking. Got to watch the word of the beaches as well if you're trying to cool down. So, but our big storyline is the danger out toward the Midwest. This could be a historic event, and folks don't want to use that word lightly. I don't want to use it lightly either here, obviously, as we're tracking things, as we're really just paying attention to what could happen, that ensuing threat here, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking the situation here, as we're monitoring. I see the latest ARRR extended range is coming out now, but let's just go over the SPC outlook here, and then we'll wrap it up, as we need to get some rest ourselves, and you do too, probably. Make sure you have multiple ways to get alerts here, especially the word like Oklahoma later on in the night. This threat's, going to be an earlier one for you guys, like next hours to come, and in Kansas and in the Missouri, some watches already in play in the western part of the state. So, again, as we're tracking things, as we're watching things here, we're just continuing to give you guys the very latest high risk. That is just, striking to see here. This is the official, all the threats combined, but it's for tornado. It's a tornado-driven high risk day here for Paducah, for Southern Illinois there, and Cape Girardeau, and I see all these different communities. Most folks, you're going to wonder what all the big concern was about. You're going to have wind, hail threats. A flood threat would be something that takes up more than 1% of folks, probably, as we go day after day here. So we've got to keep that in mind. Could be, quite a few folks impacted by that. But the tornado risk, the high tornado risk for today, many folks are going to avoid the tornadoes, because that's just how tornadoes work. They don't cover a big space area generally. The worst ones are about a mile wide. That's really bad, but, they're not going to be, like a hurricane or something like that. That's my point. So, a lot of you guys are going to be, getting lucky from the high tornado risk. Some houses could be completely gone here, tragically. And that's not too tragic compared to, the potential for loss of life. That's what is really tragic here. That's what we got to try to prevent here later today in this area. And the pink especially, but even the red, even the orange, even the yellow, and, green as well, dark green, where that marginal 1 out of 5 risk goes, all the way up, north of Houston. I know back a couple weeks ago, it wasn't even really a risk in play in parts of Texas in that event, and we had some big hail reported there, like north, county north of Houston in that big event. So you gotta always watch out. But orange risk, that 3 out of 5 goes all the way from Dallas to Detroit. That's huge. But the red and the purple we could have, there could be a lot of national media coverage if things take that turn. I mean, the biggest city in this would, I'm sure I didn't double check, but I know it's got to be Memphis as we're looking here. But then Paducah, Cape Girardeau, and points in between as well is where the greatest danger is. You saw Jonesboro, Arkansas, that TV market in danger too. And even, got to be careful. It's a 4 out of 5 risk. But Evansville, that area, if stuff holds together, it gets going out there by itself. But, Indiana, there's even concern about Ohio here, too, to some degree. Some guidance is showing some stuff where this risk might have to get extended a little bit up there. But talking about Little Rock under a big risk, even getting to where like the Arklamas there, the Arklatex and the like. So, a lot of danger here. We're going to be giving you the update as is warranted for the national level concern. But let me make sure there's no questions or comments real quick before I wrap it up. I don't see anything here in terms of any questions at this point, but Dallas, they are going to have some storms there later on that Wednesday, but the bigger concern generally, that red and purple area. Red's still bad enough. Purple is historic potentially, but doesn't mean we've seen it before. Sometimes you get the worst tornado on the edge of like the red area or something. That can happen. Sometimes the threats don't come together perfectly because these are just forecasts, and the actual reality could be a little bit different, and will be, I'm sure, as we look ahead in the timeline. So that'll do it for now. Very substantial, significant danger. Get some rest. I'm going to try to get some rest as well. Make sure you're staying weather aware in Oklahoma later in the night, though. Kansas, western Missouri as well, because we could have some, tornado threat try to emerge really in the hours to come, because people are trying to get up there for work and school. But later in the day, afternoon to evening, late afternoon really, in the evening, is when things could take that escalation to where that red-purple zone. Have a great night. Stay safe. I'll be back here